The courtroom froze. Barrett Langford, a partner at the city's most expensive law firm, smirked as he looked at the young man in the oversized gray hoodie standing at the defense table. Everyone, the bailiff, the clerk, and especially Judge Donovan Hale, thought this was a joke. They thought he was a lost defendant from arraignment court, a thug who had wandered into a high-stakes corporate lawsuit. They were wrong. They didn't know that the man in the hoodie was holding a trap that would ruin them all. By the time he opened his mouth, it was already too late. The air inside courtroom 4B of the Superior Court of Fulton County was stale, smelling faintly of floor wax and old paper. It was the smell of bureaucracy, or as Barrett Langford liked to call it, the smell of money. Barrett adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Italian suit. He glanced at his reflection in the screen of his iPad. At 55, he was the picture of legal dominance. Silver hair perfectly coiffed, a jawline that had only softened slightly with age, and a reputation that terrified opposing counsel. He was the lead litigator for Langford, Lockwood, and Pierce, the firm that handled problems for billionaires. Today's problem was simple. It was an eviction case, technically, but on a massive scale. His client, the Apex Horizon Development Group, needed to clear out a block of low-income housing in the historic West End to build a luxury condominium complex. They had crushed every homeowner in the area. Everyone had sold. Everyone had folded except for one, Mrs. Miriam Eldridge, an 80-year-old widow who refused to sign the deed to her dilapidated Victorian house. "Are we ready, Mr. Langford?" the young associate next to him whispered. Her name was Kendra, fresh out of Yale, and she looked nervous. "Relax, Kendra," Barrett said, his voice a smooth baritone. "This is a formality. The woman doesn't even have a lawyer. She's claiming to represent herself pro-SE. It's like watching a toddler try to box with Mike Tyson. Judge Donovan Hale will grant the summary judgment by lunch, and we'll be eating steak at Chops by 1. Judge Donovan Hale was a man who hated wasted time almost as much as he hated poverty. He sat on the bench, flipping through the case file with aggressive impatience. He had a golf tee time, and he intended to make it. "Call the case," Judge Donovan Hale barked. The clerk stood up. "Civil action number 24 CV 908, Apex Horizon Development versus Miriam Eldridge." Barrett stood up, buttoning his jacket with a practiced grace. "Barrett Langford for the plaintiff, Your Honor. We are ready to proceed with our motion for summary judgment." "Very good, Mr. Langford." The judge smiled. It was the smile of a conspirator. "And for the defendant?" The courtroom was silent. The defendant's table was empty. Barrett chuckled softly. "It appears, Your Honor, that Ms. Eldridge has finally seen the light and decided not to waste the court's time." "Typical," Donovan Hale muttered. "If the defendant is not present, I'm inclined to rule in favor of—" Bang! The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Every head turned. Walking down the center aisle was not an 80-year-old woman. It was a young black man, perhaps in his mid-20s. He was wearing faded jeans, scuffed Timberland boots, and a charcoal gray hoodie with the hood pulled partially up, obscuring his peripheral vision. He walked with a loose, rhythmic gait, his hands buried deep in his pockets. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The tension spiked. Barrett Langford's lip curled in distaste. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Garrick, who had been working this courtroom for 20 years, stepped into the aisle, his hand instinctively dropping to his belt. "Hey, son," Officer Garrick barked. "Wrong room. Arraignments are downstairs in 2B. This is civil court." The young man didn't stop. He didn't even look at the bailiff. He kept walking, his eyes fixed straight ahead on the empty defense table. I said, "Hold it." Garrick stepped in front of him. The young man stopped. He slowly pulled his hands out of his pockets. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a stack of files held together by a rubber band and a beaten-up leather satchel. "I'm not looking for arraignments," the young man said. His voice was quiet, raspy, but clear. Judge Donovan Hale slammed his gavel. "Young man, remove that hood in my courtroom immediately and explain why you are interrupting these proceedings before I have you thrown in a holding cell for contempt." The young man reached up and pulled the hood back. He had short-cropped hair and weary eyes, dark circles underneath them, as if he hadn't slept in a week. He looked at the judge, then at Barrett Langford. "I apologize for the attire, Your Honor," he said. He walked around the bailiff, who looked too confused to stop him, and placed his battered satchel on the defendant's table. "My suit is at the cleaners. I didn't expect the hearing to be moved up without proper notice." Barrett Langford let out a loud, incredulous laugh. "Excuse me, who do you think you are?" The young man turned to Barrett. For a second, the thug persona vanished. His posture straightened, his chin lifted. "I am Zephyr Eldridge," he said. "I am the grandson of Miriam Eldridge, and I am the counsel of record for the defense." Silence. Absolute, heavy silence filled the room. Then Barrett Langford started laughing again. It was a cruel, patronizing sound that echoed off the mahogany walls. "Counsel of record?" Barrett mocked, turning to the gallery where a few junior associates were watching. "Your Honor, this is absurd. This is clearly a delay tactic. The grandson? Does he even have a law degree, or did he watch a few episodes of Law and Order?" Judge Donovan Hale looked over his spectacles, his face red with irritation. He felt disrespected. In his court, lawyers wore Brooks Brothers, not Fruit of the Loom. "Mr. Eldridge," the judge said, his voice dripping with condescension, "this is a court of law, not a community center meeting. You cannot simply walk in here and declare yourself counsel. Unless you are a licensed attorney admitted to the state bar, you are engaging in the unauthorized practice of law, which is a crime. Now step back from the table." Zephyr didn't move. He opened his leather satchel and pulled out a single crisp piece of paper. "State Bar number 99AU401, Zephyr recited from memory, not looking at the paper. "Admitted to practice in the Superior Courts, the Court of Appeals, and the State Supreme Court as of 6 months ago." He slid the paper across the polished wood toward the clerk. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Alara, picked it up hesitantly. She typed the number into her terminal. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked up at the judge and nodded. "It's active, Your Honor. Zephyr Tobias Eldridge, good standing." Barrett Langford stopped laughing. He frowned, looking Zephyr up and down. "A lawyer? This kid? He looks like he should be serving Barrett coffee, not serving him motions." Affirmative action case, Barrett thought immediately. Probably went to some online law school. "Fine," Judge Donovan Hale grunted, clearly disappointed he couldn't have Zephyr arrested. "So, you passed the bar. Congratulations. That doesn't excuse your disrespect for this institution. You are improperly dressed. Local Rule 4.2.2 states that counsel must be dressed in professional business attire," Zephyr said calmly. "However, the urgency of the plaintiff's ex parte motion to expedite this hearing, which was filed yesterday, made it impossible for me to retrieve my court attire before the start time, unless the court prefers to grant a continuance so I can change." Zephyr looked at the judge. It was a dare. Delay the case or let me stay. Donovan Hale knew Langford wanted this done today. "Motion for continuance denied," the judge snapped. "We are proceeding. But consider yourself warned, Mr. Eldridge. One step out of line, one breach of protocol, and I will have you removed." Understood, Your Honor. Zephyr sat down. He looked small behind the large oak table. Barrett Langford buttoned his jacket and walked to the podium. He decided to crush the kid immediately. No mercy. Your Honor, Barrett began, his voice booming. This case is simple. The defendant, Miriam Eldridge, does not own the land in question. We have submitted a title search dating back 40 years, showing a break in the chain of ownership. The land belongs to the city, which sold it to my client. Ms. Eldridge is a squatter, a trespasser. We are asking for an immediate order of ejectment. Barrett turned to look at Zephyr, expecting the young man to be frantically shuffling papers. Zephyr was sitting perfectly still. He wasn't taking notes. He was staring at Barrett, and, Barrett added, improvising to humiliate the opponent. Since opposing counsel is new to the profession, perhaps he isn't aware that without a counter-affidavit filed prior to this hearing, he has no standing to argue facts. He forfeited the case before he even walked in the door. Barrett smirked. It was a technical trap. Procedural Law 101. If you don't file the paper denying the facts by the deadline, you lose. Period. The plaintiff is correct, Judge Donovan Hale said, looking at Zephyr with a bored expression. Mr. Eldridge, I don't see a counter-affidavit in the file. Do you have one? I do not, Zephyr said. Then you have admitted to the plaintiff's facts, the judge said, picking up his pen to sign the order. Case closed. Mr. Langford, prepare the order. Wait, Zephyr said. He didn't shout. He just said it with such authority that the judge's hand froze. Excuse me? Donovan Hale glared. Zephyr stood up. He picked up the thin stack of files bound by the rubber band. Mr. Langford cited Civil Practice Rule 56 regarding summary judgment, Zephyr said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming sharper. But he conveniently forgot to mention Rule 56F. If the party opposing the motion cannot present facts essential to justify opposition due to concealment by the moving party, the court must refuse the application for judgment. Barrett rolled his eyes. Concealment? Oh, please. What are we hiding? A deed to a shack? No, Zephyr said. He walked around the table, moving into the center of the well. You're hiding the fact that the city official who sold you the land 2 months ago didn't exist. The room went quiet again. Objection, Barrett roared. That is slanderous, baseless, and ridiculous. I have the affidavit of the city clerk right here, Zephyr said, holding up a document. There is no Cassian Reed employed by the land registry. The signature on the deed of sale to Apex Horizon is a forgery, and under state law, a forged deed conveys no title. Zephyr dropped the document on the plaintiff's table. It landed with a heavy slap. So, Zephyr continued, looking up at the judge, his eyes hard as flint. My grandmother isn't a squatter. Your client is the trespasser, and since you filed a motion based on a forged instrument, I believe that's a felony fraud on the court, Mr. Langford. Barrett Langford picked up the document. His hands, usually steady as a surgeon's, trembled slightly. He looked at the signature. He looked at Zephyr. The boy in the hoodie wasn't looking at the floor anymore. He was looking Barrett dead in the eye. And for the first time in 10 years, Barrett Langford felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his back. The trap had been set, and he had just stepped right into it. The recess was meant to be 15 minutes, but Barrett Langford managed to drag it out to an hour, claiming he needed to authenticate the documents Zephyr had slapped onto the table. Judge Donovan Hale, looking less like a conspirator and more like a man realizing his golf game was ruined, granted the time, but warned Barrett that his patience was thinning. Barrett stormed out of courtroom 4B, his entourage of 3 junior associates trailing behind him like terrified ducklings. He didn't stop until they reached the private attorney conference room on the 2nd floor, a glass-walled fishbowl designed for high-end settlements. He slammed the door so hard the glass pane rattled in its frame. "How?" Barrett hissed, turning on Kendra, the Yale graduate. "How did a kid in a hoodie find a forgery that we missed? Or worse, how did he manufacture it so quickly?" Kendra was shaking. "Mr. Langford, I ran the title search myself. The name on the deed was Cassian Reed." "There's no Cassian Reed," Barrett shouted, throwing his iPad onto the table. "That's what the kid just proved. It's a ghost employee, which means the Apex Horizon group bought that land from a phantom. If that deed is fake, the Eldridge woman still owns the house, and if we try to evict her based on a fake deed, we aren't just losing the case. We're looking at RICO charges." He paced the small room, his Italian leather shoes clicking aggressively on the tile. He needed a pivot. He needed to kill the messenger. "Get me distinct information on Zephyr Eldridge," Barrett ordered, pulling out his phone. "I want to know where he buys his underwear. I want to know if he has unpaid parking tickets. I want to know if he cheated on a math test in the 3rd grade. He's representing himself as a man of the people." "Fine. Let's find the dirt." Barrett dialed a number he rarely used. It wasn't a lawyer. It was a man named Draven Cole, a private investigator who used to be a detective for the NYPD until he was fired for procedural violations, which was a polite way of saying he planted evidence. "Cole?" The voice on the other end rasped. "It's Langford," Barrett said, watching Zephyr Eldridge through the glass wall of the conference room. Zephyr was sitting on a bench in the hallway, eating an apple, looking entirely unbothered. "I have a problem. A gnat. His name is Zephyr Eldridge. Young black male, early 20s, claims to be a lawyer. I need you to rip his life apart. I want to know who really bankrolled his law school. I want to know about drug arrests, illegitimate children, gambling debts. Anything I can use to discredit him before Judge Donovan Hale." "Consider it done," Cole grunted. "Give me an hour." Barrett hung up and straightened his tie. He looked at his reflection in the darkened window. He was Barrett Langford. He had destroyed CEOs, senators, and union leaders. He wasn't going to let a grandmother's charity case beat him. He turned to his associates. "We go back in there. We delay. We argue that the affidavit he produced is hearsay until the city clerk testifies in person. We drag this out until Cole finds the smoking gun. Then we bury him." But as they walked back toward the courtroom, Barrett felt a strange sensation in his gut. He looked at Zephyr again. The young man wasn't reading legal briefs. He was just sitting there, observing the hallway with a calm, predatory focus. When Zephyr saw Barrett approaching, he didn't look away. He offered a small, polite nod. It wasn't a nod of respect. It was the nod a chess player gives when they know mate is in 5, and the opponent just doesn't see it yet. The afternoon session was a bloodbath, but not the kind Barrett expected. Judge Donovan Hale was irritable. He had missed his tea time. "Mr. Langford," the judge groaned, rubbing his temples. "Mr. Eldridge has presented a sworn affidavit from the city clerk stating the signature is a forgery. You have presented nothing, just bluster." "Your Honor," Barrett said, sweating slightly now, "we require time to cross-examine this clerk. We believe Mr. Eldridge may have coerced this statement." Zephyr stood up. He had taken off the hoodie, revealing a simple white t-shirt underneath. It wasn't professional, but somehow on him it looked like armor. "I have no objection to a continuance for the purpose of testimony," Zephyr said smoothly. However, given the fraudulent nature of the plaintiff's claim, I would ask the court to order the plaintiff to post a bond. If my grandmother is being harassed by a billion-dollar corporation using fake documents, she deserves security. Reasonable, Judge Donovan Hale said. Plaintiff will post a bond of $100,000 to cover the defendant's potential legal fees and damages. We reconvene in 48 hours. Do not be late. The gavel banged. Barrett felt the blood rush to his face. $100,000 was pocket change to his client, but the humiliation was priceless. He had just been ordered to pay a bond to a woman he was trying to evict. As the court adjourned, Barrett signaled for his associates to leave. He waited for Zephyr near the exit. He needed to end this before the next session. If Cole didn't find dirt, Barrett would have to use the universal solvent, money. Zephyr was packing his battered satchel when Barrett approached him. "Mr. Eldridge," Barrett said, putting on his best senior partner smile. It was a smile that looked like a shark baring its teeth. "Impressive show today. A bit theatrical with the hoodie, but effective." Zephyr didn't look up. "I aim to please." "Look, let's cut the crap," Barrett said, lowering his voice. "You're young. You're hungry. I looked up your grandmother's property. It's worth what? 200 grand on a good day. The house is falling apart. It's a money pit." Barrett reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "Apex Horizon is a generous company," Barrett lied. "They don't want to fight a widow. They just want to build. I am authorized right now to offer you a settlement. We will pay your grandmother $500,000 for the property. That's double the market value. She can move into a nice assisted living facility in Florida." "And you?" Barrett wrote a figure on a separate piece of paper and slid it across the table. It was the number 50,000. "This is a consulting fee for you," Barrett whispered, "for facilitating the deal. You walk away with 50 grand, your grandma is rich, and this case goes away. No risk of losing. No risk of me destroying your career before it starts." Zephyr finally stopped packing. He looked at the check, then he looked at the paper with the $50,000 figure. He picked up the paper. 50,000, Zephyr mused. That's a lot of money for a guy in a hoodie. It's a starter kit for a real life, Barrett pressed, sensing weakness. Buy a suit, rent an office, stop playing pretend. Zephyr smiled. It was a genuine smile, which made it terrifying. "Mr. Langford," Zephyr said softly, "you think I'm doing this for the house?" "Everyone has a price, kid." "True," Zephyr said, "but you can't afford mine." Zephyr took out his phone. He tapped the screen and turned it around to show Barrett. It was a recording app. The waveform was moving. "State Bar Rule 8.4, Zephyr recited perfectly. "It is professional misconduct for a lawyer to engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. Offering a side payment to opposing counsel to settle a case without the client's full written consent. That's bribery, Langford." Barrett's face went pale. You recorded this in the courthouse." "Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording conversations," Zephyr said, putting the phone back in his pocket. "I learned that in 1L. And just so we are clear, my grandmother isn't moving. Not for 500,000, not for 5 million. Because that house is the only thing she has left of my grandfather, and I promised her nobody would take it." Zephyr zipped up his bag. "See you next time, Langford. Bring your checkbook. You're going to need it for the sanctions." Zephyr walked away, leaving Barrett Langford standing alone in the empty courtroom, the hum of the air conditioning sounding like a countdown. The next day was a nightmare for Barrett Langford. He sat in his corner office on the 40th floor, overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The view usually calmed him, reminding him that he was a god in this city. Today, it just made him feel vertigo. His phone buzzed. It was Cole, the investigator. "Tell me you found something," Barrett snapped. "Tell me he's a fraud." "I found something," Cole said. His voice sounded unsettled. "But it's not what you think. It's weird, Mr. Langford. Really weird." "Spit it out." "Okay, so I ran Zephyr Eldridge. Born in Atlanta, raised in the West End. Father died when he was 10. Mother worked 2 jobs. Poor kid. Smart, though. Valedictorian of his high school. He got a full ride to Columbia University in New York for undergrad." "Okay, so he's book smart," Barrett dismissed. "What about law school? Where did he go? Who paid for it?" "That's the blank spot," Cole said. "He went to Columbia Law, graduated top of his class 3 years ago. Summa cum laude, Order of the Coif, editor of the Law Review. The kid was a superstar, but here's the kicker. He didn't take a job." Barrett frowned. "What do you mean he didn't take a job? Graduates from Columbia Law get courted by every firm in the country. We pay them starting salaries of $215,000 just to breathe." "I checked the alumni records," Cole continued. "He had offers from Wachtell, Cravath, Skadden, all the big New York heavy hitters. He turned them all down. Every single one. He fell off the map for 2 years." "Doing what?" "Nobody knows," Cole said. "But I dug into his bank records. Don't ask me how. For the last 2 years, he's been receiving a monthly stipend. Not a salary. A stipend from a blind trust listed as the Whitaker Foundation." Barrett froze. The name triggered a distant memory from his own law school days. "The Whitaker Foundation," Barrett whispered. "You mean Thurgood Marshall?" "No," Cole said. "Thaddeus Whitaker, the Supreme Court Justice, the one who retired 5 years ago, the great dissenter, the strictest, most brilliant legal mind of the last century." Barrett felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Justice Thaddeus Whitaker was a legend. He was known for taking only one clerk every 5 years. A prodigy he would hand-pick and mentor in total seclusion. It was an urban legend in the legal world. They were called Whitaker's ghosts, lawyers trained not just to practice law, but to dismantle it and rebuild it. They were weaponized intellectuals. "You're telling me," Barrett said, his voice trembling, "that the kid in the hoodie is a Whitaker ghost?" "I'm telling you that Zephyr Eldridge received a wire transfer of $10,000 from the estate of Thaddeus Whitaker with the memo line, 'Go get them.'" The phone slipped from Barrett's hand and landed on his mahogany desk. He stared at the device. He wasn't fighting a street lawyer. He wasn't fighting a rookie. He was fighting the secret protege of one of the greatest legal minds in American history. Zephyr Eldridge hadn't wandered into that courtroom by accident. He hadn't worn the hoodie because he was poor. He wore the hoodie to lower Barrett's guard, to make Barrett arrogant, to make Barrett sloppy. It was a hustle. A classic, brilliant hustle. The intercom on his desk buzzed. It was Kendra. "Mr. Langford, the partners are asking for an update. The Apex Horizon executives are here. They want to know why the eviction hasn't happened yet." Barrett rubbed his face. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Tell them," Barrett stammered. "Tell them we have a complication." He looked at the court documents on his desk. The forgery Zephyr had found wasn't just a lucky break. Zephyr had likely analyzed the entire corporate structure of Apex Horizon before he even filed his appearance. He was 5 steps ahead. Barrett needed a nuclear option. If he couldn't beat Zephyr on the law and he couldn't bribe him, he had to destroy the client. He picked up his cell phone and dialed Cole back. "Forget the kid," Barrett said, his voice dark and desperate. The kid is untouchable. We go after the grandmother. Dig up the tax records on the house, find a code violation, find a gas leak. I don't care what it is. If we can condemn the house as unsafe, the city evicts her for us, and the lawsuit becomes moot. That's dirty, Langford, Cole said. Even for you, the woman is 80. I don't care, Barrett screamed, losing his composure completely. I have a $20 million development deal on the line. Burn the house down if you have to, figuratively speaking. Just find me a reason to get her out before the next morning. All right, Cole sighed. I'll make some calls to the code enforcement office. I know a guy who owes me a favor. Inspector Ronan Kane. Do it, Barrett hissed. He hung up. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. He felt powerful again. The law was just a game, and he knew how to cheat better than anyone. Zephyr Eldridge might be a genius, but he was still playing by the rules. Barrett Langford had stopped playing by the rules a long time ago. But Barrett didn't know one thing. Down on the street, sitting on a park bench, Zephyr Eldridge was listening to the conversation. He took the earbuds out of his ears. He looked at the high-tech directional microphone he had planted in the conference room during the recess. A trick he hadn't learned at Columbia, but from his neighbors in the West End. Zephyr's eyes were cold. Code enforcement, Zephyr whispered to himself. Predictable. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Hey, Grandma, Zephyr said, his voice instantly softening into warmth. Yeah, I'm coming over for dinner. I'm sorry. Listen, I need you to pack an overnight bag. No, nothing is wrong. We're just going to have a slumber party at Aunt May's tonight. Trust me, I'm going to catch a rat. That night in the West End was usually quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic from I-20. But at night, a dark sedan with no headlights rolled slowly down the street where Miriam Eldridge lived. Inside the car sat Inspector Ronan Kane. He was a man who had long ago traded his conscience for a gambling habit. Barrett Langford paid well, and Kane needed the money. He parked 2 blocks away and walked to the Victorian house, carrying a heavy tool bag. The house looked dark, abandoned. Kane smirked. Easy money, he thought. He hopped the low fence and crept around to the side of the house where the gas meter was located. His instructions were specific. Find a leak. If you can't find one, make one. Kane knelt in the mud. He pulled out a heavy wrench. He wasn't going to cause an explosion, just enough damage to release the smell of mercaptan, enough to get a reading on his meter that would justify an immediate emergency condemnation order. Once that red sticker was on the door, the fire department would evacuate the premises, and under City Ordinance 114-102, no one could inhabit the structure until repairs were made. Repairs that Apex Horizon would ensure never happened. He clamped the wrench onto the valve. He applied pressure. The metal groaned. Snap. A small hiss of gas escaped. The smell of rotten eggs filled the air immediately. Kane pulled out his gas detector. It beeped wildly. He snapped a photo of the reading with his phone. Then he pulled out the bright orange sticker. Danger. Do not enter. Condemned. He slapped it onto the front door. Job done, Kane whispered. He turned to leave, walking back toward the fence. Click. A floodlight blinded him. It came from the tree line of the neighbor's yard. Kane threw his hands up, dropping his wrench. Who's there? Silence. Then a second light flicked on from the porch of the house across the street. Then a third from the roof of the Eldridge house itself. He was illuminated like a performer on a stage. Inspector Kane. A voice projected from the darkness. It wasn't a shout. It was amplified by a speaker system. You just violated Georgia Code 16-7-23, criminal damage to property in the second degree. and Code 16-5-60, reckless conduct. Kane squinted against the glare. Police. I'm city enforcement. I'm doing my job. No, the voice said. It was Zephyr. You're doing Barrett Langford's job. From the shadows of the porch, Zephyr Eldridge stepped out. He was holding a high-definition video camera. Next to him stood a woman in a police uniform, but she wasn't a patrol officer. She wore the gold badge of the Major Crimes Unit. Detective Serafina Locke, Zephyr said, gesturing to the officer. Did you get all that? Detective Locke nodded grimly. Every frame, counselor. Kane panicked. He bolted for the fence. I wouldn't, the detective warned, her hand resting on her holster. We have the perimeter secured. You can come with us quietly and tell us who sent you, or you can take the fall for attempted arson. Your choice, Kane. Kane looked at the fence, then back at the detective. He slumped his shoulders. It was Langford. Kane spat out, his voice shaking. He said he needed the old woman out by the hearing. Zephyr lowered the camera. He didn't look triumphant. He looked sad. Save it for the judge, Zephyr said. See you in court. The atmosphere in courtroom 4B was electric, vibrating with the kind of energy usually reserved for murder trials, not eviction cases. Word had spread through the Fulton County legal grapevine like wildfire. The rumor was that a Whitaker ghost, a protege of the legendary Justice Whitaker, was fighting a partner from Langford, Lockwood, and Pierce. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Junior associates from rival firms, law students skipping class, and even a few clerks from other courtrooms had slipped in to watch the blood sport. Barrett Langford entered the courtroom like a gladiator entering the Coliseum. He looked rested, his skin glowing from a morning facial, his suit a charcoal pinstripe that cost more than most people's cars. He didn't know about the arrest the night before. Kane had been booked under a John Doe hold to keep the system quiet, a favor Zephyr had called in from his days interning at the district attorney's office. Barrett slammed his briefcase onto the plaintiff's table with a heavy thud commanding attention. He glanced at the defense table. Zephyr Eldridge was there, but the hoodie was gone. Today, Zephyr wore a navy blue three-piece suit. It was perfectly tailored, hugging his frame with sharp precision. His shirt was a crisp, blinding white, and his tie was a deep crimson silk. He no longer looked like a kid from the neighborhood. He looked like a shark in deep water. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. Judge Donovan Hale took the bench. He looked tired, his eyes scanning the packed room with suspicion. Civil Action 24 CV 908. Are we ready to proceed? We are, Your Honor, Barrett said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. He projected an air of sorrowful duty. And I have a preliminary matter that sadly disposes of this case immediately. Barrett walked to the bench, holding a document high in the air like a weapon. Your Honor, the property in question was declared uninhabitable by city code enforcement. There is a verified dangerous gas leak. It is a severe public safety hazard. He placed the report on the judge's bench. My client, Apex Horizon, is deeply concerned for the welfare of the defendant. Barrett lied smoothly, his voice dripping with fake empathy. We cannot in good conscience allow an 80-year-old woman to live in a bomb. We ask for an immediate order of possession, so my client can enter the premises and remediate the hazard. For her own safety, she must be evicted today. Judge Donovan Hale frowned, putting on his reading glasses. He scanned the report. A gas leak? That is serious. Code 114-02 is clear. He turned to Zephyr, his expression stern. Mr. Eldridge, your grandmother is living in a death trap. I cannot allow her to stay there. The law requires immediate evacuation. The courtroom held its breath. Barrett Langford smirked at the gallery. It was over. He had won. Zephyr stood up slowly. He didn't approach the bench. He didn't look at the judge. He looked directly at Barrett. "Your Honor," Zephyr said, his voice calm, resonant, and filling the room without a microphone. "Mr. Langford is correct about one thing. There was a gas leak. It was created." "Created?" The judge looked up, confused. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Zephyr said, his eyes hardening. "I'm stating a fact. The leak was caused by a heavy-duty pipe wrench wielded by City Inspector Ronan Kane." Barrett Langford laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Objection. This is absurd. Counsel is launching conspiracy theories because he has no case. This is slander against a city official." "I would like to call my first witness," Zephyr interrupted, his voice cutting through Barrett's laughter like a knife. "Detective Serafina Locke of the Atlanta Police Department, Major Crimes Unit." The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a bang. Detective Locke walked in, her face grim. But she wasn't alone. She was guiding a man in handcuffs, shuffling in an orange jumpsuit, his ankles shackled. It was Inspector Kane. He looked pale, sweaty, and terrified. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. The stenographer stopped typing, her mouth open. Barrett Langford's face drained of all color. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Donovan Hale demanded, standing up. "Why is a witness in chains?" "This man," Zephyr said, pointing an accusing finger at Kane, "was arrested last night while sabotaging my client's home. He has confessed to the police. He has confessed to the district attorney. And now he is here to confess to this court." Zephyr walked up to the witness box as Kane was sworn in. "Mr. Kane," Zephyr said softly, leaning on the railing, "you are under oath. Who hired you to break the gas valve at 1402 Oak Street?" Kane looked at Barrett Langford. Barrett's eyes were wide, telegraphing a frantic message. "Shut up. Don't say a word. I'll fix this." But Kane saw the detective standing by the door. He saw the judge's furious face. He knew Barrett couldn't save him. "It was him," Kane croaked, his voice shaking. He pointed a trembling finger at the plaintiff's table. "Barrett Langford." The room erupted. Lawyers were whispering frantically. People stood up in the back rows to get a better look. "Order! Order!" Judge Donovan Hale banged his gavel so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "He called me," Kane continued, tears welling in his eyes. "He said he needed a reason to evict the old lady before the hearing today. He offered me $5,000 to find a violation. When I couldn't find one, he told me to make one." "Lies!" Barrett screamed. Losing all composure, he lunged toward the witness box. "He's lying! This is a setup. I never spoke to this man in my life." "Sit down, Mr. Langford," the judge roared, "or I will have you shackled to your chair." "I have proof," Zephyr said calmly. He turned back to his table and picked up his smartphone. He connected it to the courtroom's AV system. "Your Honor, I would like to introduce Defense Exhibit B, an audio recording made in this very courthouse. A conversation between myself and Mr. Langford." "I did not consent to that," Barrett yelled, sweat pouring down his face. "That is inadmissible." "Georgia is a one-party consent state," Zephyr countered coldly. "Play the tape." The speakers crackled. And then Barrett Langford's voice, arrogant, distinctive, and undeniable, filled the room. "We will pay your grandmother $500,000. And you? $50,000. It's a starter kit for a real life. Everyone has a price, kid." The gallery went silent. Barrett looked like he was going to be sick, but Zephyr wasn't done. "In Defense Exhibit C," Zephyr said. "Recorded via directional microphone outside the conference room yesterday." He tapped the screen. "Burn the house down if you have to. Just find me a reason to get her out before the morning." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a career dying. Judge Donovan Hale was trembling, not with fear, but with a righteous, volcanic rage. He was a man who believed in the sanctity of the law above all else, and what he had just heard was the ultimate desecration. He slowly took off his glasses. He looked at Barrett Langford with a look of pure disgust. "Mr. Langford," the judge said, his voice dangerously low, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have never witnessed such a vile abuse of the legal system. You have attempted to defraud this court. You have solicited a felony crime against an elderly woman. You have attempted to bribe opposing counsel." The judge turned to the bailiff. "Officer Garrick, secure the doors." Officer Garrick, the burly bailiff who had tried to throw Zephyr out on the first day, unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. He walked toward the plaintiff's table. "What?" Barrett gasped, backing away. "You can't. I'm a partner at Langford, Lockwood, and Pierce. You can't arrest me in a civil hearing." "I am holding you in direct criminal contempt," Judge Donovan Hale shouted, pointing his gavel at Barrett like a weapon. "And I'm referring this matter immediately to the district attorney for charges of solicitation of arson, burglary, witness tampering, and racketeering. You are not leaving this room a free man." Barrett looked at his associates. They had all backed away from him, terrified of being associated with the blast radius. He looked at the gallery. Hundreds of eyes judged him. Officer Garrick grabbed Barrett's arm. He twisted it behind his back with practiced force. Click, click. The sound of the handcuffs locking was louder than any shout. "Barrett Langford," Officer Garrick recited, "you have the right to remain silent." As Barrett was dragged out of the well, his expensive suit bunched up, his dignity shredded, he looked back at the defense table one last time. Zephyr Eldridge was standing there, hands in his pockets, watching the spectacle. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at Barrett with a calm, terrifying intensity. He nodded once. It wasn't a nod of respect. It was the nod of a grandmaster who had seen the checkmate 10 moves ago. The lion was in the cage, and the kid in the hoodie held the keys. The fall of Barrett Langford wasn't just a stumble. It was a demolition. After being dragged out of courtroom 4B, Barrett sat in a holding cell at the Fulton County Jail. His bespoke suit jacket had been taken, his tie removed to prevent self-harm, and his Italian leather shoes replaced with orange plastic sandals. The man who had dined with senators the night before was now sharing a steel bench with a man arrested for stealing copper wire. He used his one phone call to dial the managing partner at Langford, Lockwood, and Pierce. "It's a misunderstanding," Barrett pleaded into the receiver, his voice cracking. "I need bail. I need the firm's PR team." The line crackled with a cold silence. "Barrett," the managing partner said, his voice distant. "The video is already on Twitter. It has 3 million views. The audio of you bribing the kid is playing on CNN. We're holding an emergency vote right now. You're out. Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Barrett stared at the phone. For the first time in his life, his money couldn't buy a way out. The media storm. The story of the Hoodie lawyer had gone national. News vans were parked 3 deep along the street in the West End. Reporters were desperate for an interview with the mysterious legal prodigy who had taken down a titan of the Atlanta bar. They dug into Zephyr's past, uncovering the truth about his time at Columbia and the Whitaker ghost rumors. Headlines splashed across the screens. "David in denim, How a pro bono lawyer toppled a giant. The ghost of the courtroom. Who is Zephyr Eldridge? The Apex Horizon Development Group, terrified of the public backlash, didn't just pull out of the West End project, they fled. In a frantic press conference, their CEO announced they were donating the land they had already purchased to the city for the creation of the Miriam Eldridge Community Park. It was a desperate attempt to save their stock price, which had plummeted 15% overnight. The realization. Zephyr sat in the office of the district attorney. Across the table sat Barrett Langford, looking gaunt and unshaven. He was there to discuss a plea deal. Solicitation of arson, the DA read from a file. Bribery, racketeering. You're looking at 20 years, Barrett. Barrett didn't look at the DA. He looked at Zephyr, who was sitting in the corner, observing as a representative for the victims. Why? Barrett whispered. You could have taken the money. You could have joined my firm. You're a genius, kid. You belong in a corner office, not wherever you come from. Zephyr leaned forward. That's the difference between us, Barrett. You use the law as a sword to cut people down. I use it as a shield to protect them. You forgot where the power really comes from. It doesn't come from the 40th floor. It comes from the truth. Barrett Langford signed the plea agreement. He would serve 8 years in federal prison and was permanently disbarred. The shark had lost his teeth. The new beginning. The media circus had moved on to the next scandal, but the West End was changed forever. On a humid morning, a small crowd gathered on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. It wasn't a protest. It was a grand opening. Miriam Eldridge stood front and center, wearing her Sunday best, a wide-brimmed hat shading her eyes. She held a pair of giant ceremonial scissors. Next to her stood Zephyr. He wasn't wearing a hoodie, but he wasn't wearing a $5,000 suit either. He wore a simple button-down and slacks, looking every bit the neighbor he was. Above them, a fresh, hand-painted sign hung over the door of a renovated storefront. The Eldridge Legal Clinic, equal justice under law. Go ahead, Grandma. Zephyr smiled. Miriam snipped the ribbon. The crowd, neighbors, shop owners, the plumber who fixed the gas line, erupted in cheers. Judge Donovan Hale was there, standing quietly in the back. He had sent a private letter of apology to Zephyr weeks earlier, and today he simply nodded respectfully before slipping away. He knew the torch had been passed. As the crowd mingled, eating cake and celebrating, Zephyr walked into his new office. It was small. The desk was secondhand. The chairs were mismatched, but it felt right. The bell above the door jingled. Zephyr looked up. A young woman stood there looking terrified. She was clutching a stack of eviction papers, holding the hand of a small child. She looked exactly the way Zephyr's mother had looked 20 years ago. I don't have any money, the woman stammered, looking at the floor. But I heard about you. I heard you help people. Zephyr walked around the desk. He didn't ask for a retainer. He didn't check her credit score. He pulled out a chair. Sit down, Zephyr said gently. My name is Zephyr. Tell me your story. He opened his notebook. The ghost of Columbia was gone. The guardian of the West End had arrived. The legacy. Legal scholars would study the case of Apex Horizon versus Eldridge. They would analyze the maneuvers, the trap, and the brilliant use of the forged deed. But in the barbershops and church pews of Atlanta, they didn't talk about the legal precedents. They talked about the day the judge thought he saw a thug but met a king. They talked about the young man who proved that even when the system is rigged, one person with a sharp mind and a brave heart can flip the board. And every time a developer thought about bulldozing a neighborhood for a quick profit, they would remember the name Barrett Langford. They would check the deed twice, and they would ask one terrified question. Is Zephyr Eldridge on the case? What an incredible journey. From being judged by his hoodie to bringing down a corrupt legal empire, Zephyr Eldridge proved that true power isn't about status, it's about integrity. Barrett Langford learned the hardest lesson of all. When you underestimate the underdog, you're already losing. Zephyr's decision to turn down the millions and open a clinic for his community is the ultimate act of heroism. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. It really supports the channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. I want to know, do you think Barrett Langford got what he deserved or was 8 years too light? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. Thanks for watching.